Stacy Kahnweiser didn't just work with tigers, she spoke to them. Her colleagues at the Palm Beach Zoo had watched her, time and again, enter spaces filled with 300-pound apex predators and walk away unshaken, even serene. There was something about the way she moved, how she watched and listened before acting. Tigers responded to her. They didn't just tolerate her, they trusted her. That quiet magic earned her the nickname, the Tiger Whisperer. She was more than a keeper. She was a biologist, a conservationist, and an educator. She was fluent in the unspoken language of big cats. And she believed deeply that her work, hands-on, passionate, deliberate, could help protect one of the most endangered species on Earth. But on April 15, 2016, everything changed. What started as a normal day at a peaceful Florida zoo ended in tragedy. Stacy Kahnweiser walked into the Tiger Night House, a private area behind the exhibits, away from the public, where the animals were fed, sheltered, and managed. She never came out. Minutes later, her colleagues were calling emergency services. Within the hour, she was gone. What happened to Stacy wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a wake-up call, one that would shake the zoo community, raise questions about safety, and stir uncomfortable debates about how humans and wild animals share space, even in places built to protect them. Born in California and educated at Mount Holyoke College and the University of Massachusetts, Stacy had a background in both biology and conservation. But it wasn't the degrees on her resume that made her exceptional. It was the way she applied them. She joined the Palm Beach Zoo in 2013 as the lead keeper of big cats. The role was more than just feeding animals or cleaning enclosures. It required deep behavioral knowledge, calm under pressure, and physical courage. Stacy brought all that and more. She took special interest in the Malayan tiger, a subspecies so rare that fewer than 200 remain in the wild. The zoo had 4 of them, sleek, striped predators with instincts honed over thousands of years. Stacy worked daily to monitor their health, enrich their environment, and build trust. That trust wasn't forced, it was earned. She had a sixth sense with them, one colleague said. She didn't dominate the tigers, she read them, she adjusted to them. Visitors often never saw that side of her. They saw her during educational talks, standing confidently in front of the exhibit, sharing stories about the tigers, personalities, diets, quirks. They didn't see the hours of behind-the-scenes care, the planning, observation, and restraint it took to keep both animals and staff safe. And that was always the balance, passion versus risk, engagement versus danger. Friday, April 15th, 2016, was supposed to be routine. Stacy was preparing for one of her last Tiger Talk presentations. She was set to leave the zoo within days for a new job with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It was a prestigious step forward in her career and a testament to the impact she'd made. That morning, she entered the Night House, the indoor area where tigers sleep and are shifted between spaces for cleaning and feeding. Zoo policy, like many accredited facilities, had strict protected contact rules. Staff were never to be in the same space as a tiger unless there were secure barriers in place. Tigers are not pets. They are unpredictable, fast, and capable of killing in seconds. Yet somehow, Stacy ended up in the same space as a 13-year-old male tiger named Hati. Timing features, there was no audience, no show, no dramatics. But something went wrong. Possibly a gate left open, possibly a miscommunication. It was a matter of seconds. Hati reacted. And Stacy, for all her experience, had no way to escape. Colleagues tried desperately to help, but they couldn't enter the enclosure without putting themselves at risk. Tranquilizers were prepared. Authorities were called. But by the time the area was secured, it was too late. Stacy had suffered fatal injuries to her neck and upper body. She died before she reached the hospital. News of Stacy's death made national headlines, but in the zoo community, the impact was even deeper. This wasn't a case of neglect or reckless showmanship. Stacy wasn't performing a trick. She wasn't taking unnecessary risks. She was doing the work she did every day, carefully, intentionally, and she was beloved not only by her team, but by the animals she served. Still, the questions came swiftly. Why was she alone in the night house? Did she bypass protocol? Was there pressure to cut corners? Did the zoo's policies adequately protect staff? An investigation by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and OSHA found that Stacy entered a space without ensuring the tiger was safely contained. It was a violation of internal policy. But many within the zoo world pushed back on the simplicity of that explanation. She knew those tigers better than anyone, a fellow keeper said. If she made a mistake, it wasn't out of carelessness. It was because the system didn't make it foolproof. Zoo faced intense public scrutiny. Critics demanded changes to protocols. Some asked why tigers were still in captivity at all. Online forums lit up with debate. Defenders of Stacy, defenders of the zoo, advocates for animal rights, and behind all the noise, a simple, devastating truth. An experienced, passionate, dedicated professional had lost her life. Stacy's death wasn't the first time a big cat had killed a zookeeper, but it was one of the most high-profile in recent years, and it sparked something larger. Zoos around the world revisited their safety protocols. Some adopted stricter barriers. Others increased training and communication standards. The Association of Zoos and Aquariums, AZA, which accredits U.S. facilities, emphasized the need for clear, consistent, protected contact procedures. For animal rights organizations, the incident added fuel to a long-burning fire. Groups like PETA renewed calls for an end to captive big cat programs, arguing that no level of training or love could undo the wild nature of these animals. Even those within the zoo world were forced to reflect. We're not just caretakers, one senior keeper wrote in an op-ed. We are stewards of risk. We work at the edge of control every day, and we can never forget what these animals are capable of. Stacy Konwiser was more than her final moment. She was a voice for the voiceless, a scientist, a teacher, a woman who saw beauty and complexity in the eyes of an animal others feared. She had dreams that stretched far beyond the fences of the Palm Beach Zoo. Dreams of protecting species in the wild, of educating a new generation, of making a difference. Her death was not a spectacle. It was a tragedy, a quiet, preventable loss that rippled outward from one Florida zoo to an entire global industry. Today we remember her not for how she died, but for how she lived. And we are left with the question she would likely want us to ask. What more can we do to keep those who protect wildlife safe? Because the animals aren't the only ones in danger. Sometimes. Sarah McClay loved the natural world with a quiet intensity. A 24-year-old animal keeper from Cumbria, England, she was passionate about the animals in her care, especially the big cats. At South Lake Safari Zoo, she wasn't a performer or public figure. She was a worker, a protector, a person who saw wildness not as something to fear, but as something to respect. She had always been drawn to animals. Friends remembered her as kind, patient, and focused, someone who found meaning in structure and calm in responsibility. Her role at the zoo required long hours, precision, and constant vigilance, and she was good at it. Colleagues described her as methodical, dependable, and deeply committed to the creatures under her watch. Among them was a male Sumatran tiger, rare, powerful, and unpredictable. South Lake Safari Zoo, nestled in the green hills of Cumbria, was a place where visitors could see wildlife up close. But behind the scenes, it was a working facility. Tigers were not showpieces. They were apex predators housed in complex enclosures, separated from keepers by strict safety protocols. Sarah took her work seriously. She often arrived early, reviewed the day's feeding and enrichment schedule, and worked closely with fellow keepers to monitor animal behavior. She understood that the relationship between a keeper and a wild animal could never be based on trust alone. It had to be built on consistency, barriers, and respect. Friday, May 24, 2013, began like any other. Sarah was scheduled for tiger duties that day. The zoo was open to the public, with families walking the paths, children pointing at enclosures, cameras snapping. At some point during the afternoon, Sarah entered a secure area behind the tiger enclosure, a corridor meant only for keepers, designed to remain sealed off from the animals during cleaning and feeding shifts. But something went catastrophically wrong. A door that should have been locked was open. Whether due to mechanical failure, human error, or both, the result was the same. The male tiger gained access to the corridor. Sarah, caught completely off guard, was suddenly face to face with a fully grown predator. There was no time to react, no time to run. The tiger attacked, inflicting devastating injuries to Sarah's head and neck. Zoo staff rushed to respond. Emergency services were called, visitors were evacuated, armed police were dispatched. The tiger, ultimately, had to be coaxed back into a secure space using trained procedures. Sarah was stabilized on site and airlifted to Royal Preston Hospital. But despite every effort, she died later that day from her injury. The shock was immediate and far-reaching. News of her death spread quickly through the UK and beyond. But within the zoo world, it ignited something deeper: grief, anger, and serious questions about safety and responsibility. How did the door open? Why wasn't it double-locked? Did protocols fail, or were they never properly implemented in the first place? An inquest later revealed a complex picture. The door mechanism was flawed. Staff had previously raised concerns. Some procedures were informal or poorly documented. The system relied too heavily on habit rather than verified security. It wasn't just one failure, it was many small failures, overlapping at the worst possible moment. Sarah had followed the rules as she understood them. But the rules weren't enough. The owner of the zoo at the time, David Gill, faced intense scrutiny. He had built the zoo from the ground up, but his management style came under fire. Records showed a pattern of safety issues, regulatory warnings, and a culture where keepers sometimes worked in unsafe conditions without adequate backup or oversight. The public demanded accountability. Animal welfare groups questioned not only the zoo's management, but the ethics of housing such dangerous animals in facilities where human error could be fatal. The Health and Safety Executive, HSE, launched a full investigation. In the end, David Gill was charged under health and safety law and later found guilty of breaches that led to Sarah's death. During the investigation, a troubling picture emerged of broader institutional failings. Testimonies from staff described a workplace where concerns were raised but rarely acted upon. Maintenance logs revealed mechanical issues had been reported weeks before the incident. The facility had passed inspections, but often just narrowly. Sarah's family was devastated. Her mother spoke publicly about Sarah's love for animals, her diligence, and her dreams. She had planned to travel to Borneo one day to work with orangutans. She kept a journal where she wrote about her hopes of one day helping to rehabilitate endangered species in the wild. Her life was built around purpose, not risk. For those who knew Sarah, the story was never just about failures or headlines. It was about a young woman who cared, who did everything she could to do her job right, who believed in the animals she worked with, even as those animals reminded us all what they are truly capable of. Sarah McLay's death was preventable. It wasn't the fault of the tiger. It wasn't the fault of the profession. It was the fault of a system that asked for perfection, but failed to provide the tools and safeguards needed to uphold it. In the years since her passing, changes have come slowly. South Lake Safari Zoo eventually changed ownership. The facility has undergone reforms, but its history remains a cautionary tale. The incident led to tighter oversight and renewed emphasis on protected contact, both in the UK and internationally. Training procedures were revised, mechanical systems were updated. But for some, these reforms came too late. Today, Sarah is remembered by family, friends, and fellow keepers as brave, diligent, and kind. Her name lives on in discussions about zookeeper safety, about accountability, and about the real risks involved in working with wild animals. even in controlled environments. She wasn't reckless, she wasn't untrained, she was doing her job, and the system let her down. Memorials have been held at the zoo and at her former school. A bench was installed near the tiger enclosure she once cared for, with an inscription that reads, "For Sarah, who gave her heart to the wild." Her story leaves us with an enduring question. If we entrust people to care for the world's most dangerous animals, what are we doing to care for them in return? Because no life given in service to animals should ever be lost to negligence, and because the cost of inaction is not just regulatory, it is human. Sarah's legacy should be more than a warning. It should be a turning point, one where every zookeeper everywhere is given the tools, the training, and the respect they deserve. Rosa King was doing what she loved. Calm, observant, and fiercely committed, Rosa was a 33-year-old zookeeper working at Hamerton Zoo Park in Cambridgeshire, England. She wasn't driven by recognition or reward. Her life revolved around care for the animals, for the staff, for the sanctuary she helped maintain. She found beauty in the everyday rhythm of the zoo, in the early mornings, in the quiet check-ins, in the bond that could be built, slowly, through trust. For Rosa, that bond existed most powerfully with the big cats. Tigers weren't just ferocious creatures or photo ops. They were intelligent, emotional beings with routines, moods, needs. Rosa believed that with enough time and consistency, mutual respect could grow even with the wildest animals. It was that belief that guided her work, and ultimately, it was that belief that cost her life. Hamerton Zoo was small, family-run, and widely regarded as a safe, well-kept facility. Known for its rare and exotic species, the zoo had grown in popularity, drawing visitors from across the UK. But like any facility housing dangerous animals, it relied on structure, gates, barriers, checks, protocols. When everything worked, the system was invisible, but when something failed, the result was catastrophic. Rosa had worked with the zoo's Malayan tigers for years. One, in particular, a male named Sip, had been in the facility since 2014. He was powerful, moody, and unpredictable, like many apex predators held in captivity. But Rosa understood him. She knew his habits, his behaviors, his tells, and, by all accounts, she respected the risk. She wasn't careless, she wasn't showboating. She was experienced, she followed protocols, she carried out her duties with precision, never cutting corners. She was admired by colleagues and beloved by visitors who saw how deeply she cared for each animal. On May 29, 2017, something went wrong. It was a quiet bank holiday Monday. The park had opened as usual. Families with young children moved between enclosures, staff handled their morning routines. Rosa was inside the tiger enclosure. Not in the public viewing area, but in a secure section reserved for cleaning and feeding. This was supposed to be a protected space, separated, safe, a space where humans and predators would never meet face to face. But that morning, a breach occurred. Somehow, CIPF entered the enclosure where Rosa was working. Whether it was due to human error, gate malfunction, or procedural miscommunication was never publicly confirmed. But the result was immediate and irreversible. Rosa had no time to escape, no chance to defend herself. CP attacked. The force of the tiger's assault was fatal almost instantly. Witnesses described hearing a scream, then chaos. The zoo was evacuated, emergency services arrived, but Rosa was already gone. She died in the very space she knew better than anyone else, the place she felt most confident, most capable, most calm. and the place where she had spent years ensuring the safety of others, both animal and human. News of the attack spread quickly across the UK, but the coverage was brief, lacking detail. Out of respect for Rosa's family, the zoo released minimal information. Official investigations were quiet. The incident was labeled a freak accident, a tragic one-off. There was little follow-up, no broad public outcry. It became a line in the news cycle, and then it disappeared. But those who knew Rosa and those who understood the industry knew it was more complicated than that. Captivity comes with risk. It comes with pressure. It comes with systems designed to prevent the worst-case scenario. Until the day they don't. Rosa's death wasn't the result of recklessness. It was the consequence of a system that depends on perfect procedures to keep imperfect situations under control. Even in well-managed facilities, one misstep, a latch not fully closed, a signal not heard, a procedure misread can mean the difference between life and death. No zookeeper walks into a carnivore enclosure unaware of the risks. They walk in despite them. They do it because of passion, because of duty, because of belief. Rosa King believed in her work. She believed in her animals. She believed that her presence made their lives better. And she was right. Her efforts brought enrichment, consistency, and care to animals who would never again know the wild. She fought not just for their survival, but for their quality of life. But belief alone can't prevent tragedy. Protocols are built to protect, but they are vulnerable to the fallibility of human systems. No system is immune, no fence is flawless, no plan is perfect. Rosa understood this, and she chose to work anyway, because she believed it mattered. In the aftermath, Hamerton Zoo was closed temporarily. Investigations were conducted by the police and the health and safety executive, but details were sparse. No criminal charges were filed. The tiger was not put down. Zoo officials said that Rosa would not have wanted that, and they were likely right. She never blamed the animals. She accepted their nature. She worked with it, never against it. Colleagues held a private memorial inside the zoo, leaving flowers, notes, and pictures at the tiger enclosure. Guests posted hundreds of tributes online. Many spoke of Rosa's smile, her dedication, her kindness, of the way she knelt to speak to children visiting the zoo, of the time she spent making enrichment toys for the tigers from cardboard boxes and scent trails. Her impact was quiet, but it ran deep. Today we remember Rosa King not only for her tragic death, but for her passionate life. She was a professional, a daughter, a friend, a protector of wildlife. She gave everything to the animals in her care, including her life. Hers was a life of purpose, built around humility, discipline, and compassion. Her story is not just about loss, it's about reverence for the humans who walk beside danger every day, for the animals that remind us of the wildness we can never truly tame, and for the importance of transparency, reform, and honesty in how we talk about animal captivity. Her death should prompt questions. How do we protect those who dedicate their lives to animals? How do we ensure that safety procedures are not just written, but followed and reviewed? And how do we honor those who are lost in the service of something greater? If Rosa's story moved you, take a moment to share your thoughts. Remember her name, remember her devotion, and if you've ever visited a zoo or watched a keeper enter an enclosure with a predator, ask yourself, can a system that depends on human perfection ever truly be safe? Is enough being done to prevent these tragedies before they happen? And what is the real cost of keeping wildness behind a fence? Comment below, share her name, keep the conversation going. Let Rosa King be more than a headline. Let her legacy live on, not in silence, but in change.